The morning the lawyers arrived with 4 silent bodyguards was the same morning Daniel Reed almost decided not to stop. For nearly 8 months he had followed the same routine. Wake up before sunrise, make a simple breakfast for his 6-year-old daughter Lily, drop her off at school, and walk the long route to his janitor job downtown. And every morning, at the same cold bus stop on Pine Street, he saw the same woman sitting quietly on the bench with the same worn coat wrapped tightly around her thin shoulders. Most people walked past her. Some looked at her with pity. Others didn't look at all, but Daniel always stopped. He didn't know why at first. Maybe it was because he understood what it felt like to struggle in silence. Or maybe it was because when he first noticed her months ago, she had been shivering so badly that even the steaming coffee in her hands couldn't stop it. That morning had changed everything. But before we continue, if you believe small acts of kindness can change someone's life, take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this. Daniel's life had not been easy. 2 years earlier, his wife had passed away after a long illness that drained every dollar they had. Hospital bills swallowed their savings, their house was sold, and the future Daniel had imagined disappeared almost overnight. Suddenly he was a single father raising a little girl who still asked every night when her mother was coming home. Daniel never had the heart to give her the final answer. He worked 2 jobs for a while, until exhaustion nearly caused a car accident on the highway. After that, he took the janitor position at a corporate office building. The pay wasn't great, but it gave him time to be there for Lily. Their apartment was small, their furniture mostly second-hand, but their home was filled with quiet love. And every morning Daniel carried 2 cups of coffee instead of 1. The first time he offered the extra cup to the woman on the bench, she had looked surprised, almost frightened. She hesitated before accepting it, as if kindness itself felt unfamiliar. Daniel never asked questions. He simply handed her the coffee and sometimes a breakfast sandwich if he could afford it. At first, she barely spoke. Just a quiet thank you. But over time, their routine became something unspoken yet important. Daniel would sit beside her for a few minutes before work, and the woman would slowly warm her hands around the cup while the city woke up around them. Her name, he eventually learned, was Evelyn. She never shared much about herself, but Daniel noticed little things. Her posture was elegant, even in worn clothes. Her voice carried the softness of someone who had once lived a very different life. Yet she always avoided personal questions, so Daniel never pushed, because sometimes people don't need questions. They just need someone to show up. Winter grew colder as the months passed. Snow piled on sidewalks, and the bus stop bench became icy and unforgiving. Daniel started bringing an extra scarf, then gloves. One morning he even brought a small blanket Lily insisted they give her. Lily had drawn a smiling sun on the tag. "Everyone deserves warmth," she had said proudly. Evelyn had stared at the drawing longer than expected that day, and for the first time Daniel saw tears quietly fall down her cheeks. Still, nothing in those months could have prepared him for the morning everything changed. It was a Tuesday. The sky was gray, and a thin fog hung over the city streets. Daniel approached the bus stop with his usual coffee and sandwich in hand. But something was different. A black luxury SUV was parked near the curb. Standing beside it were 4 men in dark suits with earpieces, their postures stiff and watchful. Daniel slowed down immediately. His first instinct was that something had gone wrong. Maybe Evelyn had gotten into trouble. Maybe someone had reported her. But as Daniel stepped closer, the scene grew even stranger. 2 sharply dressed lawyers stood near the bench holding leather briefcases, and sitting quietly between them was Evelyn, except she didn't look the same. Her hair was neatly brushed, her coat had been replaced by an elegant wool jacket, and though her face still carried the same calm expression, something about her presence felt entirely different, the kind of presence that made strangers instinctively step aside. Daniel froze halfway down the sidewalk. He suddenly felt embarrassed holding the cheap coffee cup. For a moment he thought about turning around, but Evelyn looked up. And the second she saw him, her expression softened in a way that erased the tension in the air. Daniel walked forward slowly. The bodyguards watched him carefully, but Evelyn raised a gentle hand, signaling them to stand down. Daniel offered the coffee like he always did. and Evelyn accepted it with the same quiet gratitude. For a brief moment, the world felt normal again. But then one of the lawyers stepped forward. He opened his briefcase and removed a thick folder of documents. Daniel's heart started pounding. He had no idea what was happening. But Evelyn stood slowly and faced him with calm dignity. For the first time in months, she began telling the truth. Evelyn Whitmore had once been one of the wealthiest women in the state. She was the majority owner of a massive real estate empire built by her late husband decades earlier. Their properties spanned across cities, office towers, and residential developments worth hundreds of millions. But after her husband passed away, Evelyn had slowly realized something disturbing. The people she trusted most, advisors, executives, and even distant family members, had begun quietly manipulating the company. They assumed Evelyn, now older and grieving, would never notice. Money was being moved, assets transferred, documents altered. By the time she fully understood what was happening, the betrayal was everywhere. So Evelyn made a decision no one expected. She disappeared. Without telling anyone except her legal team, she left her mansion, her wealth, and the world that had grown dishonest around her. For 8 months she lived anonymously, observing life without status or power. She wanted to see how people treated someone with nothing. Most ignored her. Some treated her like she didn't exist. But one man stopped every morning with a cup of coffee and genuine kindness: Daniel. The lawyers explained that Evelyn's disappearance had been part of a legal strategy. During that time, her team gathered evidence against those stealing from her company. Lawsuits were filed, bank accounts frozen, several executives were now under investigation. And now that the case had been secured, Evelyn had returned. But before reclaiming her empire, she had one final matter to address: Daniel. The lawyer handed him a document. Daniel stared at the pages, confused and overwhelmed. Evelyn gently explained. During those 8 months, she had learned something more valuable than business. She had learned what integrity looked like when no one was watching. Daniel had given kindness without expecting anything back. He never asked her for money, never asked her story, never treated her like a burden, just simple human compassion. And that kind of character was rare. The document offered Daniel something he never imagined possible: a leadership role in a new charitable foundation Evelyn planned to create. One focused on helping struggling single parents rebuild their lives, housing support, childcare assistance, job training programs, everything Daniel himself had once needed. The salary alone would change his life, but more importantly, it meant he could help thousands of families who felt as lost as he once did. Daniel struggled to process the moment. His hands trembled as he thought about Lily, about their tiny apartment, about the nights he lay awake wondering how long he could keep everything together. And suddenly the future looked different, not easy, but hopeful. Evelyn smiled warmly, the same gentle smile she had worn on that cold bench every morning. She told Daniel that sometimes the most powerful people in the world are not CEOs or billionaires. Sometimes they are janitors carrying 2 cups of coffee, one for themselves, and one for someone who might need it more. Months later, the Whitmore Foundation opened its first community center. Families filled the building on opening day. Single parents laughed with their children. Job counselors helped people write resumes. And a bright playroom named Lily's Corner welcomed kids whose parents were rebuilding their lives. Daniel stood near the entrance watching it all unfold. He still woke up early every morning, still made breakfast for Lily. But now, instead of cleaning office hallways, he spent his days helping people find second chances. Evelyn often visited quietly, watching families walk through the doors with hope in their eyes. And every time she did, she remembered the cold morning a tired single father offered her a cup of coffee without knowing who she was. Before we reach the end of this story, we have a special request for you. Comment the word kindness below if you believe even the smallest act of compassion can change someone's life forever. Because stories like this remind us that goodness still exists in the world. And sometimes it shows up in the simplest moments. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us what humanity really looks like. Because somewhere out there, someone is still carrying 2 cups of coffee, hoping one small act might make a difference. And sometimes, it does.